Hello, and welcome to another episode of Her Head in Films. I'm Caitlin, and I'm your host. On this podcast, I share my personal thoughts and feelings about the films I watch, mainly art house and world cinema. What makes this podcast unique is that I weave together my life experiences with an in-depth discussion of films. I explore the impact that cinema has on me and why I connect so deeply to it. As I like to say, my head isn't in the clouds, my head is in films. Last week I had a cold and I wasn't able to bring you a new episode, but I'm back this week and I'm feeling better, feeling back to normal, thankfully. And so I'm talking about Joanna Hogg's 2007 film Unrelated. This is part of a series that I am doing about debut feature films by women directors. I love this film. I had to talk about it. I saw it probably over a year ago, and ever since then, it has stayed with me. It's a subtle film, but there's so much nuance and there's so much depth to it, and I'm excited to bring you a fuller discussion of this film that I think, even though it won awards, I still think it's sort of unappreciated or sort of unknown in the mainstream, really. So I hope that you will stick around and that you will listen to the episode and that you will find some value in it. Her Head in Films has a Patreon where you can financially support the podcast on a monthly basis and also access rewards and extras. You can find more information at patreon.com/herheadinfilms. At one level, you get a shout out on each episode. So I'd like to give a shout out to my amazing patrons, Spunden, Polina, Olivia, Carolyn, Jesse, Feminist Overlord, Michelle, and Lindsay. Thank you all so much. I appreciate you, and you make this podcast possible. If financial support isn't an option, consider reviewing the podcast on iTunes and Stitcher. It helps it get better placement, helps people discover it, especially on iTunes. So if you have a few moments and you're willing to do that, I would greatly appreciate it. And you could also tell your friends and followers about the podcast. I really would appreciate that so much. I really am so excited to talk about this film. I have a very long list of films that I want to cover on the podcast. It's a list that I keep adding to. And Unrelated has been on that list for months and months. And I thought that this was really the perfect time to talk about it because I am beginning this series that I'm doing about debut feature films by women. And I wanted to start with Unrelated because it's dear to my heart. It's a film that I love. It's a film that I want more people to know about. And I'm excited and thrilled to be able to talk about it and to go deeper into the film. Another exciting thing about this film was the way that I got to watch it, which was through a site called voodoo.com. It's VUDU.com. And they have this section on there where there's free films. It's called Movies on Us. And you can watch the films for free. You just have to see commercials. They do have some ads in them. But, most of the films are terrible. I will be honest. They're sort of mainstream schlock that nobody would want to watch. But every now and then, they get some foreign films, they get some art house films. They replenish them and change them every month. So every month I check. And for a while now, they've had this film Unrelated. They have other Joanna Hogg films available for free right now as I'm recording this episode. I'm not paid to tell you about Voodoo. It's just a website that I use because I like to see free films when I can. And it's just a really nice thing that I discovered. They have all of her feature films on there for free right now. So I've been able to see Unrelated and Archipelago, which was her second film after Unrelated. I haven't watched Exhibition yet, but I am interested in it. So Joanna Hogg is a British filmmaker. She was born in 1960. So far in her career, she's made 3 feature films, Unrelated, Archipelago, and Exhibition. She actually started with photography early in her life, and then she went into television, and then she finally made her debut film in 2007. Unrelated is her debut feature film, and it was shot in Tuscany. Now, her first film was a short film, and she actually made it with a Super 8 camera that was given to her by Derek Jarman, which he's this very famous and well-respected, now departed, avant-garde filmmaker. And he gave her this Super 8 camera, and that film starred Tilda Swinton, before Tilda was famous. So it's really sort of fascinating. I haven't seen that film, but so it's just interesting to think about sort of how her film career started. I mean, she made that short film in the late 80s, and then she didn't even do her debut feature film until 2007. You know, as I talk about these films about women, it is impossible not to talk about the obstacles that are in the way of women filmmakers and how much harder it is for them to get their films made, not just to get that debut feature film made, but to get the second film made and the third film made. I mean, we have so many directors who seem to make a film every year or a film every other year, these male directors. And then female directors, you're lucky if they make a film per decade sometimes. We can only hope that that is changing. But, so Unrelated was Hogg's big break. You know, it really put her on the map. It won all kinds of awards upon its release, and Hogg garnered comparisons to Eric Romay, Yasujiro Ozu. I would also liken her a bit to Michelangelo Antonioni, who I have featured on this podcast when I talked about his film La Ventura, which is one of my favorite films ever. I would compare her with Antonioni because of sort of her focus on the bourgeois, you know, the sort of the richer people of society, especially British society. She certainly does focus on that group of people, which maybe could be a critique, but I really like her cinema. I particularly like Unrelated. Archipelago, I didn't quite get into as much, but Unrelated has just been, I just love it. I've really fallen in love with this film, and watching it for a second time so that I could talk about it on the podcast. You know, sometimes I love rewatching films, sometimes I don't. I'm kind of like that with books. Like, I read it once and then I move on, you know, because there's so much in the world that I want to read and watch and experience. And so I sometimes don't want to revisit things because I want to discover new things. But this podcast has been an opportunity for me to reevaluate certain films, to go back and rewatch them. And that has been a really positive experience for the most part. And there are things that you see on that second viewing or that third viewing that you didn't see the first time. And you see the way the different elements are interacting with each other and the different connections between characters or scenes or images. And so I find that it can be an enriching experience. So Unrelated, if you haven't seen it, there will be spoilers in this review. I'm going to talk about it, and it's really important with this film that you know there is a big scene in this film that comes near the end of it. And if you listen to this review without seeing the film, that will be ruined for you. So if you want to watch the film on Vudu.com, you could do that and then listen to the episode. Or if you just want to listen to the episode and you don't care about the spoiler, then go ahead and do that. But I just want you to be fully aware of what you're getting yourself into. That for some films, it doesn't matter if there are no spoilers necessarily. With this film, there is this moment that the film is building up to, and that it reveals, and it makes everything that came before it make more sense. And so I just want you to know that there will be spoilers. When I talk about a film, I want to go deeply into it, and I just want to talk about it freely. But to begin with, Unrelated is about a woman named Anna who goes on vacation to an Italian villa with her friend Verena, but she calls her V throughout the film. Anna is in her 40s. We don't know her exact age, but I would put her at 40 or above. And so is V. And at the villa, V is there with her husband and her children and her cousin and his son. So Anna is going into sort of this family, they're on vacation in Italy, and they have invited her there, and she wants to go on a holiday because she's having issues in her marriage. And at the beginning of the film, we don't quite know throughout the film what has happened, but there is something wrong. There is something off, and Anna is obviously going through something very emotional and difficult that she is trying to hide, and she does hide, but that it's always sort of there on the surface. And so she goes to this Italian villa, she spends time with this family, and it's sort of divided between the adults, the parents, and their children, the kids. I like to call them the kids, but they're sort of in their late teens. And there is this one boy named Oakley, and he's played by Tom Hiddleston, who Tom Hiddleston now is this huge, huge star. But in 2007, he was not as well known. And he's actually in a lot of Joanna Hogg's films. He recurs throughout her films as an actor. And Anna sort of develops this flirtation with Oakley, who's in his late teens, I would say, or early 20s. Tom Hiddleston looks extremely young. It's sort of shocking to see how young he is in this film. There's the flirtation going on there, and like a sexual tension, and that's woven throughout the film. And really the film is building to this emotional reveal, this emotional catharsis that happens, and I'll talk more about that. And so this film is really about a woman sort of in crisis, a woman at this very emotional time in her life, a woman who's very lonely. And I really think, and the reason I'm talking about the film is because of so many reasons. I think it is a powerful film about a woman's experience, a mature woman's experience, a woman in her 40s, a woman going through a crisis, a woman, the interiority of a woman, the feelings and emotions of a woman, the heartbreak of a woman, and also the loneliness that women can experience for various reasons that I will talk more deeply about. So there's so much emotional depth to this film. It's a very, I would say, interior sort of film. Not a lot happens throughout the film, but there's an emotional center to it the entire time. And that is conveyed through the actress Catherine Worth, who plays Anna. And she gives this tremendous performance, I think. It's subtle. It's not very loud or expressive. It's just this subtle, authentic, beautiful performance that she gives. But I wanted to share a bit about what Joanna Hogg said about the film, about how she wrote it, how she, sort of the genesis that I guess it took on. But in an interview with The Independent, when the film came out, she said, quote, "In 2003, my father died, and I was trying for a family. I started to write Unrelated as a channel for all my feelings of sadness, and I wanted to make a film doing everything I was told not to do in television," unquote. As I said, she worked in television a bit before she became a filmmaker. And that part about Hogg trying to have a family is important because, as I will explore more in depth, the crisis for Anna is that she can no longer have children. She is going through menopause, and she never had children. And so now she has to confront the reality that she will never have biological children. That her and her husband, his name is Alex, will not have, that traditional family that they had envisioned for themselves. And, but we're not told that at the beginning of the film. It comes much later on. And yet it informed so much of the film once we learned that. Everything that happens makes sense, and it's just a very important thing. She was asked about the process of writing Unrelated and just her creative process in general, and I wanted to share it because I love hearing women directors talk about their work. I love hearing about women artists, women writers, women filmmakers talk about how they make their films, how they make their art, how they create. I find these women to be incredibly inspirational and fascinating. And so I just want to share some of her words. This is from an interview with Camera, with a K. It's like a website, Camera. Quote, I begin with the desire to express something intensely felt, but this is not a precise chronology of events that happened in my life. It is an internal map rather than an external one. And the crucial thing for me is to depict that core of emotion in as clear and true a way as possible. So after this soul searching, the ideas gradually expand and my imagination starts to kick in. But throughout the writing process, my imagination is constantly challenged by a need to be emotionally true, unquote. And I think this is an important thing because I think Unrelated has an emotional component to it. And I think that emotion runs throughout the film. And I think that's what makes it such a lasting and powerful film for the viewer. And for me personally, like I said, I saw this film probably over a year ago. And it stayed with me, and I knew that I wanted to talk about it and that I wanted to explore Anna, this character that Hogg created, because Joanna Hogg wrote and directed this film. I don't know if I mentioned that. And something really unique, I think, about Hogg cinema, and in particular in this film Unrelated, are the static shots, or how her camera keeps its distance from the characters. It's pretty far away most of the time, and it's pretty static, sort of a stationary camera in a lot of ways. And in that interview with Camera, she talked about that, and she said, quote, I knew early on that I wanted the camera to be very still, but into this stillness I wanted to throw a lot of life and chaos, that the two seemingly opposing styles would rub up against each other and the frame could burst out beyond what you actually see. I wanted to encourage the audience to imagine what might be just around the perimeter of the frame, unquote. So I love that because I hadn't thought of it that way about the camera. You know, I'm really good at talking about themes and characters and things like that in a film. I'm not as good talking about the technical aspects of it because I don't have any experience with that. I've never picked up a film camera myself. I don't know the technical aspects of it. But when she puts it into those kinds of words, it's very interesting and makes me think of the film in a deeper way of, you know, when a director everything a director does has a meaning. You know, the shot that they set up, the way they set that shot up, whether they're doing a close up, whether they're doing a long shot. You know, they purposely make these decisions. It's not accidental. It's not a mistake. And so I just love hearing directors talk about that process of why they did that. And if you do watch the film, you will, or if you've seen it, you will notice that it's a bit of a slower film, and there is that distance that the camera has from the characters. There are really no close-ups, I would say. I mean, there is no close-up on people's faces. And the camera doesn't move a lot, and it's far away from the characters. But that is actually doing something. You know, there is a point to that. So as I said, now I'm going to talk more about the film, talk about scenes and themes and things like that. That's just how I am. So Anna goes to this Italian villa. As I said before, this was a film shot in Tuscany, so it's set in Tuscany. And she arrives at this Italian villa to see her friend Verena, called V throughout the film. And I guess they've been friends for many years, and V has her family there, and also her cousin is there with his son, Oakley, played by Tom Hiddleston. So immediately, Anna is an outsider. And this is where the title of the film comes from, Unrelated, because she goes into this Italian villa and everybody there is family. Everybody there is related in some way except her. She is not related to any of these characters. And this will become more important as the film goes on and as we find out that she can't have children. And so she goes on this holiday because she's having issues in her marriage. And from the outset, we don't know what they are. From time to time, she jogs and she will call her husband Alex and they will talk or they will fight. And I think Hogg perhaps does this for a reason, probably to keep you watching. I wouldn't say there's a suspense in the film, but there is this desire on your part to know what is going on in Anna's life. What is this turmoil? What is this crisis that she's going through? Why did she go all the way to Italy and leave her husband and go on this holiday without him? We realize that she needs space, she needs to get away, and we're wondering the whole time, well, what is it? What is happening here? And in some of the early scenes, something is set up that recurs throughout the film. And this was something that struck me when I saw it for the first time, was Anna in her bedroom. This is something that will recur throughout the film. And it's not something I'd really ever thought about before. I don't know if another film has sort of so intimately incorporated a woman's bedroom into the narrative of the film, but that is very much a part of this film, is Anna in her bedroom in the villa alone. And there's such an intimacy in these scenes, and it made me think about sort of how vulnerable we are in our bedrooms, whether we're sleeping or we're like, some people sleep naked, they sleep in the nude, or some people have their night clothes on, their pajamas. It's this very private space. It's this space where other people don't see us and where we can be our most private selves, right? And I don't know, I just loved these scenes of Anna in her bedroom, and they recur throughout the film, especially after difficult experiences. And I'm someone, like, I feel very connected to my bedroom. Like, I'm always in my bedroom, when I'm not living, out in the world. Like, I am someone who, I need alone time. I need to be alone. That is very important to me. I don't like being around a lot of people. I'm not a social person. I like to be alone in my room. I like reading or watching films or writing or dreaming. I'm a daydreamer. And so I thought that these bedroom scenes sort of conveyed a kind of interiority of Anna. And I think it also relates to Ozu, who often filmed inside homes, inside rooms, inside different domestic and interior spaces from the films of his that I've seen. And obviously the static camera, the stationary camera, also relates to Ozu. That stationary camera that observes characters sort of from a distance. And so very few close-ups, or none at all, with Unrelated. And so I think that's also why she gets compared a bit to Ozu as well. So Tom Hiddleston plays Oakley, and he is the son of Verena's cousin. And as I said, this was when Hiddleston was unknown. Hiddleston was not famous at all. I wouldn't say I'm a huge fan of Tom Hiddleston. Other people just sort of go crazy over him. I don't necessarily feel that way, but I think he's a good actor, and I think he's good in this film. He's like a little, he's very arrogant as Oakley. He has all that bravado and arrogance that young teenage boys have, And he certainly captures that. And he has this mischievous sort of quality about him too. Sort of this gleam in his eye, like you never know what he's thinking, you never know what he's gonna do next. He's just incredibly young, and from the offset of this film, there are two camps. There are the adults with Verena and her husband and Oakley's father, and Anna ostensibly should be part of that group. And then there are the kids. There are these people's children who are in their late teens. And those are sort of the two camps at this Italian villa. And Anna starts to break off from the adults, and she spends a lot more time with the kids. And as you're watching it, you're just like, why is she doing this? It's very strange, really. And but that is just immediately we see that there is this break between them, and that she is going with the kids. And but for the most part, everything is very light and very shallow at this villa. You know, everybody drinks and they play party games and they lounge by the pool, and it's just your average sort of holiday, I guess you could say. But Anna's mood is very much in conflict with this setting. You know, all the people there are happy and carefree, whereas Anna is apart. She's lonely. She's troubled by something that remains unstated for much of the film, and that hangs over everything, and that hangs over her. And of course, as you know, it's the fact that she can't have children and that she has reached menopause. That is what she's struggling with. That's her interior struggle that she's going through. But of course, we don't know that for much of the film. We don't know that till much later. So the whole time we're thinking, what is going on? Because she seems so sad. And you can feel Anna's loneliness. You can feel her sadness, even though she obviously tries to cover it up. And I think you can feel that loneliness in those bedroom scenes that I mentioned. The way that she lies in bed, the way she can sort of hear the antics of the kids outside, but she's always so separate from it. And her quietness is really set against the noise of these kids. And so she's in her 40s, but she starts to hang out with these kids, and she seems so out of place with them. And but I think that she is, in some ways, wanting to feel younger, possibly wanting to recapture her youth. You know, when you don't know about the menopause thing, you just think, what is she doing? Why is she hanging out with these kids who are really half her age? But it takes on a poignancy when you find out what she's going through. You realize that she's like so many of us, in that she is really trying to recapture her youth in some way, and that she just wants to sort of let go and feel free. And she doesn't want to sit around with the stuffy adults and talk about adult things. She wants to feel alive. She wants to, I think she wants to sort of escape herself, escape her pain, you know. And so Anna starts this flirtation with Oakley. It's just there all of a sudden between the two of them. It's this sort of unspoken sexual tension. And you feel it very strongly in one particular scene where the other kids leave the room. They go off and do something. And then she's just sitting there with Oakley, and there's just complete silence. But you can feel this tension between them. And it's so moving, her attraction to Oakley and the things that she does. I mean, because she's, he's half her age, and, we don't know to what extent he is really interested in her, or if he is playing with her or playing with her emotions or something like that, or leading her on, because the way Hiddleston plays Oakley, it is absolutely believable that he could be doing that. We don't trust this guy at all. He has that mischievous thing about him. He is not to be trusted, I assure you. But it's just, there's something touching. Like, there's this scene where she's at the dinner table and she has her hair up in a ponytail, but then she takes it down and you can tell that she seems to be waiting for Oakley. You can tell that she is always aware of him at all times and that she hopes that he notices her. And at one time he does sit by her, and I don't know, there's just something very touching about her desire for him. There's something very relatable about it, that here is this woman in this sort of emotional crisis, feeling her age. And we know what happens to women when they reach a certain age, don't we? That once a woman is not seen as attractive, that her value and her worth just sort of dissolve. If you are a woman who is seen as attractive for much of your life, once you lose that, it can be very difficult, and so here is a woman, and Catherine Worth is beautiful, she's fit, she's very attractive, but she's not 20 years old. She can't compete, right, with these 20-year-old girls that Oakley and his friends are involved with and attracted to. She has to confront her age and what her age means. And I think that's very difficult for her, but I think it's also a relatable thing. And honestly, I can't think of another film right now about a woman going through something like this. Oh, I mean, we don't even like to talk about periods and menstruation in films, right? I mean, nobody talks about it. Nobody wants to talk about it. We certainly don't talk about menopause or menopausal women or what that struggle might be for them, and how it does represent this transition in your life from, being able to bear children to not being able to bear children. And, Anna is going through that, and I just can't remember another film that actually truthfully tried to represent that, and how devastating that can be for some women who may have kept waiting, who maybe it was never the right time to have children for them, and they kept waiting and they thought, oh, I'll do it eventually. And then all of a sudden they don't even have that choice anymore. That choice is taken away from them. And you can tell that that's very painful for Anna. And so I wonder if also she's starting to feel like she's not attractive anymore, that, that she's out to pasture, as they say, And of course, I think all of this is bullshit. I don't think a woman's worth should be based on what she looks like. I don't believe any of this. I don't believe your age should determine your worth as a person or as a woman. But I'm saying that this is the cultural reality that women live with. That when they hit a certain age, that it affects them. And I wonder if through her flirtation with Oakley, she wants to feel attractive to someone. She wants to feel like she's still, sexy or desirable, right? That her desire for Oakley is a desire for affirmation, for validation that she is still attractive and worthy of sexual desire. So she spends all her time with these kids. They smoke pot. They do really silly things, And as I said, once we know that she's going through menopause, all of this makes so much more sense. That this really is a way to lose herself, to feel young again. She just doesn't want to be with the adults, And also, all these adults are parents. The adults are what she's not and can never be. She is the only adult there who is not a parent and doesn't have a child. So even being around the adults could be more painful because they're going to talk about their children. They're going to talk about their lives in that way, and she doesn't have that. And it may be a reminder, and so that could also be why she is hanging out more with the kids. And the sexual thing with Oakley, it gets stronger and stronger. Like there's this scene where she goes skinny dipping and she's like the last woman left in the pool and all the teenage boys are still in the pool. And she basically gets out of the pool naked in front of them while they're oogling her and watching her. And she seems really uncomfortable about doing it. That she doesn't want to be seen naked in front of these boys, but she kind of has to. She has to get out of the pool. But at the same time, we know that she is attracted to Oakley. And so it's also this moment of like furthering the sexual tension between them because now he has seen her naked. I mean, she's nude, completely. And he sees her body that way. And it's also an exposure. It's a very big exposure on her part. And, throughout the film, Catherine Worth just does a tremendous job, I think, in conveying the layers of Anna. There is this way in which she carries sadness in her body and in her face, and you can feel that sadness throughout the entire film, even during the carefree moments, even when she is skinny dipping, with the kids and smoking pot and and getting drunk and dancing with them. And there's still just some kind of unspeakable sadness about her. And Anna is confronted about how much time she's spending with the kids. Verena, called V, she gets very upset and confronts Anna about it. But I think V wants Anna to open up. She knows something's wrong. She knows something's going on. But Anna is just not capable or not willing or able to talk about what's happening between her and Alex, to talk about the pain that she is going through. I just don't think she's able to do it. And I think she needs to lose herself. She needs to dissolve herself into this place, And I think this is a really good film about how a place can change us to some extent. It can intoxicate us. It can get us to do things that we wouldn't do in our normal lives. And this is really a recurring theme in a lot of other films that are set in Italy. A film like David Lean, his film Summertime, that stars Katharine Hepburn, which I've talked about on the podcast because I'm a huge fan of it. It's also about an older woman. I mean, Katharine Hepburn, I think, is older than Catherine Worth is in Unrelated, and she is a spinster. I don't love to use that word, but she is an unmarried woman who goes to Italy, and she's sort of destabilized by falling in love with a man, and she is sort of drunk on Italy as well, and sort of transformed by Italy. There is, I think Luca Guadagnino's Call Me By Your Name would fall into this as well. This idea of like Italy being this other world, this more liberating, open space where people can be more libidinous, more hedonistic, more sensual. And the summertime and summer itself brings that out. I mean, not just Italy, but I think in the American imagination especially, Italy is a place of romance and sensuality. And so often when these characters go to Italy, they undergo sort of a transformation through their bodies, through their sensuality. You can even see it in Mike Newell's The Enchanted April, which is another film about 4 women who go to Italy and are really transformed by their experience of going there. I think certain places can sort of cast a spell on us, and I think that happens to Anna to a certain extent. That this Italian villa, or just being with these kids especially, it casts a spell over her. it intoxicates her and it allows her to find relief, I guess, from some of the pain that she was feeling at home with her husband, with feeling like she isn't going to have the life that she may have envisioned or to have the family that she may have envisioned. And there's this really sort of, I would say, heartbreaking moment a little bit, or touching. Once again, so it's just it's such a human moment where they go into town and Anna's by herself and she goes into this lingerie shop and she buys lingerie. And she's possibly preparing for a night with Oakley. I think in her mind, she's thinking that this flirtation with Oakley is going to go somewhere, that the two of them are going to end up together. And I think he's leading her in that direction because they have this conversation where they're talking about all kinds of sort of very intimate things like infidelity, marriage, sex. He's very straightforward about these things. He says he doesn't believe in fidelity and he thinks sex is what really matters in marriage. And he asks Anna why she and her husband don't have any children. And she doesn't talk about it. She doesn't really answer him. And, watching it the second time, I thought, oh, that was supposed to sort of be a hint to us that something going on with her has something to do with these children. But it's also, I think, an indication of how her relationship with Oakley made her, she got a certain impression from him, I think. The way he talked about sex, the way he tried to be intimate with her in that way. I think that's why she thought it was going in a particular direction, which is why she bought that lingerie. And this film is so much about human dynamics, about the dynamics of desire, of unspoken desire, of desire conveyed through looks, through the eyes. It's not something that's easy. It's very subtle. They never really touch in this film, Anna and Oakley. They never kiss. They never really make physical contact. And yet there is this sexual tension, this sexual desire that exists between the two of them. And that's obviously the acting of Catherine Worth and Tom Hiddleston, that they were able to convey that desire without saying anything, really, through their eyes and through these glances. And I think a lot of us have had those experiences in our life where we thought, maybe this person is attracted to me, but you don't know for sure and you don't know how to act on it. And so neither one acts on it, but you can sort of feel it in your body. And that's there. It's there between the two of them. I personally am really compelled by films about desire. Like, I talked about it on Call Me By Your Name. I love that film. It's such a film about desire and sensuality. And so I think Unrelated, I really would recommend Unrelated if you like Call Me By Your Name. They're two very different films. They're doing very different things. They're centering very different experiences and subjectivities. Unrelated is about an older woman and her crisis, her emotional crisis. But they do share that setting of Italy, that setting of the summertime. They both have desire in them. So there are things that sort of bind them together. And that when I saw Call Me By Your Name, I wanted to rewatch Unrelated. Like, for me, they have some kind of connection to each other for me, or they bring up each other when I think about them. So I would definitely recommend Unrelated, if you really liked Call Me By Your Name. But later that evening, after that really intimate discussion with Oakley, the kids, along with Anna, who's in the vehicle, they crash. They crash really bad. Basically, the vehicle looks totaled. And it's they were probably under some kind of influence of a substance. We don't know what exactly, but these kids have been smoking pot, they've been getting drunk. It's very likely. Everyone is shaken by it, and they walk back to the villa, but they do not tell the adults the full story about what happened. And that vehicle didn't even belong to them. That vehicle was borrowed from somebody else. So this becomes a really big deal later on in the film. And another very important scene is between Anna and Oakley. So another night they go out on the town. Anna is with the kids again. They get drunk. They're running around. They're being fools. I can't stress to you how foolish these kids are and how Anna looks just so crazy trying to hang out with them. It's like I get why she's doing it, but it's like, why are you doing this? You are running around, but, you know, all of us want to like recapture our youth, I guess. But they go back to the villa, and Anna invites Oakley to her room. I mean, she doesn't say, let's go have sex. She just says, you know, if you'd like to come to my room, you can. And so she's inviting him into this very private space, you know, the bedroom, where we've seen her for a lot of the film, you know, alone. And this is her private space. And so I think it's a very big, and she's married. You know, that can't be forgotten either. This is a very big deal, what she's doing. This is a big risk that she's taking to possibly be unfaithful to her husband and to invite this man, this young boy, really. I mean, he's in his late teens, but to invite this young man into her like inner sanctum of her bedroom. And he says, better not. He says that he better not. And he kisses her on the cheek and he leaves. And her face says everything. I mean, oh God. This scene just broke my heart into a million pieces. She looks so heartbroken by this rejection, and every nuance of that heartbreak registers on her face. And I think in that moment, the spell of Italy is just completely broken. She goes into her room alone. She lies in bed naked, and she's sort of staring at the ceiling. I mean, I think you can tell she's just, you know, stupefied by it. She's just so heartbroken. And I think this is when she starts to realize that she is different from these kids, that they do not see her the way they see each other, that she's not really part of the group, that she does not really belong. And like later on, she watches him flirt with another girl, like on another evening. And you can tell how pissed she is while she, you know, watches him do that. And she says something really interesting when she goes on one of her jogs and she calls her husband Alex. And she says, and I think this really explains a lot, and I think it sums up a lot of, you know, why she was spending so much time with the kids. And she says that it's nice to lose herself in all these people. And we can feel, again, that something is very wrong, even though we don't know what up to that point. And it reminded me, too, of, you know, her desire for escape, her desire for, like, you know, to get away from the drudgery of her everyday life and to feel something else and to just lose herself. It reminded me of how a vacation is really sort of the suspension of real life, you know. Throughout this film, these people, they're lying around, they're playing games, and obviously they're the bourgeoisie, so they can afford to do this. A lot of people can't afford to go on vacation, and they certainly can't afford to go to an Italian villa. You know, my parents were working class. We never went on vacation. Ever. Like, I didn't go on vacations. I had maybe a few experiences of it. I went to, like, the lake a few times during the summer. My grandparents had a house at a lake. that we would go to, but I wasn't one of these people that went to Hawaii as a kid or went to Disney World or, I really didn't have traditional vacations. We were working class, we struggled financially a lot, it just wasn't really an option for us. So obviously this is about people who can afford these kinds of vacations. They can afford to go to another country, to go to Italy. I've never been to Italy in my life. I've never been out of the United States. I don't have money for that. That's not part of my reality. But so that's probably why I like films like this so much, is that for me it's like a vicarious experience. Oh, I can watch these people with money go to Italy and have a transformation or fall in love. So it's a bit of vicarious living through some of these films. But when you do get a vacation or you get a few days off, it can be the suspension of real life. And in this film, you really feel the laziness of summer, the sensuality that it brings to the surface. So Anna tells V about the crash. And this is like a nuclear bomb going off in this family. It triggers a major confrontation between the adults and the kids. Those kids get in major trouble for what they've done. The fact that they crashed the vehicle, didn't tell them about it, and just a lot of things. Oakley's father in particular is brutal and almost physically violent. We don't see it. We only hear the screaming. We hear the yelling between Oakley and his father. And in this film, these kids seem really alienated from their parents. I wouldn't say that this is like an affectionate family. I grew up, I was really affectionate with my parents. We were always telling each other how much we loved each other and always hugging and kissing. And I grew up in a really affectionate, loving family. I don't get that sense from this film with these kids and their parents. I don't get that sense of like love and affection. There seems to be this distance between them, but especially between Oakley and his father. Like his father calls him a disgrace, and all. Like his father seems to have this disdain and almost this disgust for Oakley. And it comes off really powerfully in the film. And, I don't know how great these people are at parenting these kids, really, But it's just this big blowout, this big explosion of anger and hostility and all of that. And of course, Anna is cast out. These kids hate her because she told on them. And, she doesn't belong with the parents, the adults, but now she doesn't belong with the kids either. So she really is just a complete outsider at this point. And I think partly why she told V about the crash is because Oakley rejected her. I think she felt hurt by it, and I think that she may have lashed out subconsciously. She may not even think that that's why she did it, but she was obviously hurt by his rejection of her. And of course now they hate her, because of what she did. But, despite this argument, they are still a family. They are all still related. And from the beginning, Anna has been an outsider. She's really been a disruptor to some extent. And I also think that this family, made of parents and children, they're also a very painful reminder of the family she can't have and the children that she will never give birth to. And and after this point, she has to hang out with the adults. She's not with the kids anymore. But I don't think she feels like she belongs in either camp, and I think she knows that she doesn't. And, I got to thinking, how this film fits in with films about Italy. That most films really romanticize Italy and things like that. But I got to thinking that I don't think Hogg particularly romanticizes Italy in this film. Like near the end, there's like this field of dead looking sunflowers. We don't see a whole lot of the landscape in this film. It's not like a travel brochure for Tuscany. That's not what this film is. It's not about showing the resplendent beauty of the Italian countryside. It doesn't capture that the way, say, Call Me By Your Name does, or Under the Tuscan Sun even. We don't see a lot of the landscape at all. I think that Hogg is much more interested in the characters, in the interiority of those characters, and also the physical interiors of the villa. It just doesn't have that sun-soaked beauty of a Call Me By Your Name. And Anna doesn't have a romance. She isn't transformed by her holiday, I don't think she comes out of it transformed, but I do think that the vacation gave her the time and space to deal with what she was going through, or to start to deal with it. And I think she feels more alone. I think she was running away from the problem. She ran away. She thought, if I go to Italy and I do this and I lose myself, I won't have to think about it. But I think she realized she was even more alone, that away from her husband, that's not the way to deal with it. That perhaps the way that they get through it is together, But I don't want to say that her going to Italy didn't do anything at all. I don't think she's transformed, but I do think that it gave her some time and some space to think through things. And obviously it was a good thing that Oakley rejected her, because she may have made a decision that she would regret, that would have alienated her from her husband or possibly destroyed her marriage. So maybe in that situation, Oakley was actually the adult. Maybe he was the smart one to say, I'm not going to do that. I don't want to cross that line, But she's cast out, and so she goes to a hotel. It's very depressing looking, but she doesn't feel like she belongs there anymore. She has disrupted things through telling the adults, the kids have turned on her and she can't relate to the adults. And so she goes to a hotel and she leaves the villa. Now, this is a very important scene. This is a scene that makes everything come together. And it's one of the most powerful scenes I think that I've ever watched. And watching it again for the podcast, it made me cry. I was just crying so much when this scene came up. And so Verena comes and to see Anna at the hotel. And she wants to know what is wrong. She desperately wants to know. And it's very interesting what happens with the camera in this scene too. But just as the camera for much of the film has been distant from the characters, there's been this distance, I would say that the characters themselves are also distant from each other. But that distance is bridged in this scene. Because now Anna and Verena, V is what they call her, Anna and V sit on the bed at the hotel. So they're closer physically. There is now this intimacy. And there is now real talking, not just chit-chat. I can't overemphasize how much of this film the characters are just floating on the surface. They are skimming the surface. And the only time any kind of real emotion or feeling or truth comes out are in very emotional moments like the fight between the parents and the kids. That's when people actually say something. Because the whole film, it's just pleasantries and platitudes and chit-chat and small talk. And it's like nobody's really talking. Nobody's really saying anything. Nobody is... it's just nothing. There's no real depth or substance to the interaction between these characters because they are so disconnected from each other and they are so distant from each other. And so it is extraordinary when V is on the bed with Anna, and she is actually physically there, and they're not chit-chatting anymore. They are really talking about something. And so Anna opens up, she starts crying, and it's like this raw sobbing that seems to emerge from the deepest part of her body and soul. It's just this uncontrollable sobbing. And V actually comes over and holds Anna. There is finally this meaningful touch, this meaningful contact, because V has known the entire trip that something is wrong. And so Anna explains that she thought she was pregnant, but when she went to the doctor, she discovered that she wasn't pregnant. She was going through menopause and that she won't be able to have children. And she's devastated by this. And she says, quote, "I'm not young, am I?" unquote. She's realizing, what has happened, that she's going through this thing. And this is real, and she won't be able to have children. She doesn't even get the choice anymore. Up to that point, she had a choice. And now she doesn't. So menopause is obviously, a difficult experience. It is a reminder that youth is gone. She feels a lot of regret for not having children when she had the chance. She says to Verena, you have a family, you belong somewhere, while she, Anna, will always be, quote, on the periphery of things, unquote. And that is where she's been the whole time in the film in relation to this family. She has been on the periphery. She's been on the outside. She's been separate from them because they are a family unit, and families have a special relationship to each other that when you are an outsider, you can never fully understand it. You can never fully penetrate it. You are always on the outside looking in, There's just such a power about this scene. It's the power of speaking something so painful out loud and to someone else. There's a huge amount of vulnerability in this scene of Anna ripping her heart out and saying what her pain is and why she's so sad and why she's so devastated. And what's beautiful is that V is there for her, and V lets her cry and sob, and she holds her and she puts her arms around her and she tries to comfort her. And so it's this powerful moment, not just of articulating devastation, but of being comforted and loved by another person. Feeling like you can open up and you can be raw and you can be undone in front of another person and you can be vulnerable in that way, and they will just hold you and they will be there for you. And I don't think all of us have people like that in our lives. I don't think all of us feel that level of connection, And so that's what I think this scene is, it's, even though her and V had been sort of obviously distant throughout the film, you can tell that they do care about each other. And I think Anna needed to say this. She needed to share it with someone. She needed to tell somebody what was going on. And it brings her a catharsis. And I think it brings catharsis to the viewer too. And it was very cathartic for me. But as I said, I got emotional. I was crying. And this scene is really why I wanted to talk about the film. Is because I don't see scenes like this every day. I mean, it has stayed with me ever since I saw the film, how powerful it was. The way that she just broke down, and Verena held her. And it's one of those scenes, I don't know what else to say about it, but I did want to talk about it. And she goes back to the villa, and they welcome her there. And I think there is this unspoken forgiveness that takes place. And when the family is leaving the villa, they all hug her. and even Oakley. And so I think that's sort of a subtle, forgiveness there, that even though she told and, she did all that everything is okay. I mean, that's the sense that you get at the end. So I don't think this holiday fixed the issue. She has this scene where she's crying on the phone to Alex, and you know that they're both hurting, and I don't think the holiday fixed the issue, but I think it gave her a chance to come to terms with this new reality. And maybe she needed this time to herself. She needed this time to be alone, to be in another place, to experience different things in order for her to come back to Alex, or to go back to Alex, to go back to her life. She stays a bit longer at the villa than the family does. They leave, they say their goodbyes to her, and then she's riding to the airport. She's in the car on the way to the airport, and she's on the phone with Alex again because they've been talking throughout the film. And she's laughing and she's smiling. And there is actually a sense that perhaps things will be okay, that perhaps this distance has actually brought them closer together. That by going away for a little while, she's able to go back and to return and to try to face, this new reality and what has happened, and it's irreversible. It cannot be changed. It can only be confronted and coped with in some way. But it doesn't make the devastation any less painful or difficult. But I just love this film, and I wanted to talk about it. I think it's a powerful debut feature film, a powerful first film for someone to create, where Hogg is breaking a lot of the rules, as she said in that interview. She made a film that she wanted to make, with the kind of emotion that she wanted to have in it. And she focused on a woman in her 40s. She focused on a woman going through menopause. She focused on a film about emotion and sadness and loneliness. That's what she wanted to do, and that's the film that she wanted to make, and she didn't compromise. And I think that's important. I really do. This film, I still think it's a powerful portrait of loneliness. I mean, for me, that is the emotional part of it that I connect to, is that sense of loneliness, that sense of sadness, that sense of devastation. I don't think you have to be going through menopause to connect to Anna and to connect to what she's going through and how she's struggling. And she's just such a human character. And Catherine Worth's performance is incredibly subtle, but very nuanced and very authentic and very believable. And she does a tremendous job at showing the interiority of this character and her struggles and what she's going through. And there's just such an emotional impact about this film. It leaves a very deep impression. I mean, I watch a lot of films. I don't think about every film that I watch for months afterwards. But I was always thinking about Unrelated. Like, I still think about it. And watching it for a second time, I still loved it. And, other people may not get that sense about it. They may watch it and they don't like it or whatever. But for me, there was something just profoundly moving about it, and it stayed with me, and it's still with me. And that's why I had to talk about it. That's why it was on my very long list of films that I want to talk about on this podcast. And I think films like this are important. Films about women in their 40s, older women, even when we get films about women, it tends to be teenagers or girls in their 20s. And, I'm in my 20s, but I want to see a fuller representation of women. I don't want to just see stories about teenagers and girls in their 20s. I want to see films about older women, mature, women going through different experiences. And this film is just unapologetically focused on a woman's life and a woman's struggle. And I love it. I just love this film. I hope that you'll watch it, or I hope that you watched it first and then listen to this episode. It's not a film that a lot of people know about. I mean, I just happened to come across it, you know. I just did. I knew about Joanna Hogg, and I thought, well, this looks interesting. I like films set in Italy. I'll give it a chance. And look at me now. I'm so deeply in love with it, and I'm so glad I got to talk about it. So I hope you liked this episode. I'm glad that I'm back. I'm sorry that I left you for a whole week. I hope that you survived it. But I'm glad to be back and talking about films, and it just makes me so happy. Thank you for listening to this whole episode. I appreciate it so much. Until next time, keep watching great films. Bye for now.